A big thank you to Boo Boo for supporting me through my Ko-fi website. And we are back on the beta for update 37.2, and we are back on Bull Roarer with some more Mariner news. As you can see, the Bull Roarer is now open for the public. There's quite a few people trying out the new class. So it's pretty crowded in here right now. But in this video, we're gonna focus on the blue line Mariner, so the Shantycaller. But before diving into the trait line, we're quickly gonna go through the Mariner and how it works. I know I did it for my red line video as well, but I think it's nice to have a little bit of introduction before moving on to the trait line. So the premise of the Mariner class is the balance attunement system. As you can see from this boat-shaped bar on the middle, this is your attunement bar called balance. And the idea for Mariner is that you're currently, when you're doing nothing, you're in steady, which is the middle part. And then you can either use your skills to go aftwards, which is backwards towards the left, or forwards, which is forward towards the right. Typically, using DPS skills will take you forward, and using buff or healing will take you backwards. So without going too much in depth with this, the idea is you want to stay in the middle part that I'm hovering over now. You don't want to go too far to the aft or too far to the fore, because you will get some debuffs on yourself and you will get stunned. So the idea is to stay in the middle part here while using your skills. Kind of like if you're DPSing, you build, use a finisher on the fore side and then recenter to get back to the middle. But in any case, you get the idea. Don't go too far fore or too far aft. Try to stay in the middle part. That's the premise of Mariner. Right now, I am not traded in any specific trait line, which means we have all the baseline Mariner skills right here on my bars. Starting on the far right, we have the Sail 2 skills. You get 5 Sail 2 skills for free. And these are basically port skills. We don't know if they're fellowship or single target only, but Mariners do get porting skills as a class. You can see that the skills are typically color-coded. Red typically means damage. Blue is more defensive afterwards building skills, and green is typically a type of healing skill, and yellow is more like a CC debuffing skill. So let's go through these skills real quick. There is Toss the Bottle, which basically heals yourself. You can toss a bottle. I believe you can target someone else with it as well. So kind of like a nice single target heal that the Mariner gets. Fizzling Rocks is AoE, and it deals damage, but it's basically a AoE interrupts induction, so in front of you like this. Sludge Pot is a ranged damaging skill, also AoE, which debuffs your targets for 5 seconds, plus 50% attack duration and plus 50% skill induction debuff. Belly of Brine is your cleanse, so you can cleanse any diseases, fears, wounds, or poison effects on yourself. We have Salt Cure, which is your corruption removal skill. Flick is your main interrupt skill. Rummage is a, let's call it a fun skill. Using Rummage will give you a random skill out of 5, I believe. And you can see when I click this, I get the Rummage Stone, which is a 5-second stun. And you can see that I have a buff for 10 seconds. And if I don't use the skill, it'll go back to Rummage. I can Rummage again. I got the stone again. But I can wait for the cooldown again. Let's Rummage again. Maybe we get something else. Keep getting the stone. It's kind of unlucky. But it's definitely random when you use Rummage. I'm going to try one more time. Hopefully I don't get the stone again. Rummage. And this time I got the knife. So there's, I believe there's 5 different ones. There's like a couple of healing ones, a couple of stuns, and this bleed skill, the Rummage knife. So Rummage, more of a landscape fun skill, I would say, rather than a practical DPS line skill. Do get 2 toggle skills, Shanty Steady Fore and Shanty Steady Aft. And these skills are pretty simple. If you toggle Shanty Steady Aft, you will slowly build pips towards the aft. As you can see, my bar moves, but since I'm out of combat, it goes back to the middle. But this will help you shifting your bar whichever direction you want. So if you need help getting a bit more towards the left, you would then toggle Shanty Steady Aft, and the other way around if you want more help getting to Steady Fore. Sea Legs is your standard breakout skill. Recenter is your big skill to centralize your balance. This can only be used right after using a finisher's skill. So Recenter Basically, if you're far to the right, using recenter will take you straight to the middle. We have a couple of blue scales, a blade shield, and you'll notice that a lot of the swordplay or buffing skills will have a 10-second buff on them. So the way Mariner works is that once you use a skill that has a 10-second buff, it will affect the next skill you use. So you kind of want to learn how the skills interact with each other and then try to make up a good order of chains to use your skills. So as we can see, Blade Shield, for example, gives you 25% parry chance, but for your next attack, riposte damage is increased by 50% and step back damage reduction is increased by 15%. You can see the duration is 10 seconds, but it pretty much lasts until your next skill. So you have a 10-second window to use your next skill and use this buff. On guard gives you plus 5% run speed, gives you some power, gives you a 50% parry skill parry chance, and plus 100% thrust damage on your next attack. Step back gives you 25% partial evade chance, and for your next skill, disengage gains a heal, and riposte enrages a target. Enrage the target doesn't mean enrage like we know it right now. Enraging the target means that if it's a ranged mob, it will be forced to use melee skills and get into melee range. And then we have the afterwards finisher called Disengage, and Disengage, as you can see, enables recenter. So if you were to use the Disengage, then you could recenter to get back to the middle. Disengage gives you 10% of both mitigations for 10 seconds, and also 30% run speed for 10 seconds. So a nice skill to use if you need to get away. And at the bottom we have, well, let's call them DPS, or the 4 skills. We have the North Wind, dealing damage and reducing attack duration by 5% on the target. Thrust deals damage and buffs your advanced damage 30% on your next attack, or gives step back partial evade chance 50% more. Riposte deals damage and gives advanced 30% damage buff. Advance is a 2-attack skill, and it will give 50% finisher skills damage to your next attack, and also 15% dramatic flourish critical magnitude buff, if you would like that too. Aggressive strike is a damaging skill, and it gives another 10% disengage mitigations to the next attack. So if you were to use aggressive strike into disengage, you would then get 20% both mits. And finally we have lunge, which is the 4 finisher, and it's basically a really hard hitting skill, dealing massive damage and also enabling recenter. So those are your baseline Mariner skills, and I think we can go into blue line now. So the blue line of the Mariner is called the Shantycaller. It sings shanties to coordinate and motivate allies. Shantycallers use ribald song and catchy melodies to motivate themselves and their allies, coordinating movements and keeping spirits high while completing difficult tasks. Skills earned, Dramatic Flourish. And as you can see, Dramatic Flourish, this effect does not stack with Captain's Master of War critical hit buff, so we can see that the Shantycaller is kind of like a Red Captain-esque trait line, so kind of like a buffing while also dealing some damage kind of trait. And a lot of the skills in Blue Mariner will not stack with the Red Captain. So it's definitely an alternative to the Red Captain. You can see that the Dramatic Flourish deals damage, and the effects applied to the raid within 5 meters. You have to be really close to your allies. So if you have a Blue Mariner, you need to be close to the Mariner to receive the buffs. And the effects applied to the raid within 5 meters is 25% critical hit chance, but only for 3 seconds. A very strong buff, a short duration though. So we're gonna go ahead and spec into a blue line. You can see that we earned the Dramatic Flourish skill, and the way I'm gonna do this is just go from top left to the right and keep going down, and once we unlock the set bonuses, we will take a look at them as well. So starting off at the top left in blue line, we have Firm Footing. You're so accustomed to the shifting of deck that you move more quickly when steady. So this is a buff to your steady run speed, and I believe this is like once you go too far to the left or right, and when you get back to steady, you will get a run speed buff from what I've seen. So this will just make you run a little bit faster once you're in steady. We also unlocked the first set bonus, Inspiring Presence. Your swordplay finishers inspire allies, pushing them to deal more damage. So this effect does not stack with a Captain's Inspire damage buff. So another effect that doesn't stack with Captain. So you can kind of see the idea here. You don't want to have a blue Mariner and a red captain. You would pick either of them for sure. So let's look at the finisher and what happens to the finishers. After using a finisher, effect applied to the raid within 40 meters, plus 4% damage for 10 seconds. So as a blue Mariner, you want to use your finishers like every 10 seconds. Keep this buff going active. That's the first set bonus in blue. Next up, we have One with the Sea. Combat like the sea has an ebb and flow. You're able to better benefit from the positive effects from changing balance states. So this traded fully gives you +5 temporary balance buff duration. So to explain this pretty briefly, once you get into the 4 side, you get a damage buff, and this trait will make that damage buff last longer. And if you get to the 4, you get a damage reduction buff, and that will also last longer if you trade One with the Sea. Motivating Melody gives you Motivating Song. We finally have a second class with the Motivating buff. So this is basically motivating speech. You can pop this and you get the motivating buff, 10% morale. So Captain and Mariner will have access to this skill now, and you can see that it's really high up in blue, so both yellow and red can pick up this easily. Mariner has motivating speech. Second trait set bonus in blue has been unlocked, Resonant Song, +5 shanty buff durations. And we're gonna get some shanty buffs later in the traits, but this trait will basically just improve the duration of your buffs. Next up, we have Stormy Seas. You're able to remain in unbalanced states for longer before you are forced to resteady yourself. So extreme balance grace periods up to 5. And what this means, the extreme balance is basically the outer edges of fore and aft. And if you go too far, you get a debuff and then you get stunned. This basically means that it takes a bit longer before those effects apply to you. Next up, we have Enheartening Songs, increasing the healing potency of your shanties. We now unlocked our third set bonus. The West Wind is blue line only, so we get a new skill. Let's hit apply. The West Wind is a shanty buff skill, and it does not stack with 2 arms damage buff, and the effect is applied to the raid within 10 meters, and you get 10% damage for 12 seconds. And we can also see that all your shanty skills actually heal your fellowship within 20 meters. So using Motivating Song, North Wind, West Wind will all put a heal over time on your fellowship, and an initial heal as well. And there's going to be more buffing skills, but basically using your buffing skills will put heals on your fellowship. Next up, we have Cleansing Salts. So putting 2 points into this will alter the Salt Cure skill, and when you remove a corruption, you actually put an incoming damage buff on that target. It's not the greatest thing because there's not always going to be a corruption to remove, but it's nice in some instances, whereas if you remove the corruption, there's an incoming damage buff. I don't know exactly what the buff is, but if you remove the corruption, you put an incoming damage buff on the target. Defensive Posture is our next trait set bonus. When fighting defensively, you are able to more effectively reduce incoming damage. So this basically means that once you go to the aft side, you get a damage reduction buff, but Blue Mariner will just simply get to 10% more and have a lot more damage reduction on the aft side. Next trait is Shrug Aside Blows, making step back damage reduction better. We can take a look at step back. Using step back with this trait will make you take 10% less damage. Light of Spirit gives you 5% incoming healing modifier if you trade all points into this. New set trait bonus. West Wind gets a 5% buff potency and South Wind gets a 10% buff potency. Let's take a look at the West Wind. It is now 15% damage for 12 seconds, so a 5% increase. And we don't have the South Wind yet. We'll get that soon, I'm assuming. And the South Wind is increased by 10%, and South Wind is the next trait we're going to look at. The South Wind is basically a make haste. It's a run speed buff, so we're going to just take a look at that real quick. The South Wind, 35% run speed for 8 seconds. You can see that this is pretty quick, so pretty nice run speed buff that Mariner has access to. And with this set bonus, we can see that in Blue Mariner, if you're Blue Mariner, you get 35%, but if you were to trait this as red or yellow, it will only be 25%. We can see that we unlocked the next set bonus, Banners of War. It gives the skill, Call the Banners of War, and this effect does not stack with Captain's Standard of War, so this is basically the banner of the Blue Mariner, like the Red Captain banner. Effects applied to raid members within 40 meters, 25% damage for 15 seconds. And you can just pop this, and it will simply give the buffs to your raid members within 40 meters, so pretty much always going to hit everyone. The next trait is the Frigid North Wind. The North Wind gnaws at your foes, reducing their critical defense. This will change the North Wind skill, giving it a critical defense debuff of 3% as well. Keen Sight further improves your steady balance bonus chance to critically hit. So I've seen this buff when I've been hitting a dummy, so steady critical hit chance. I guess that means when you get back to steady, you will get the critical hit chance buff. So if you go to right side or left side and get back to steady, you should be getting the Keen Sight critical hit chance buff. So 3% crit chance from that. And we can see that we unlocked the Breaking of Thangorodrim. This is basically a Oathbreaker's Shame for the Blue Mariner. The Breaking of Thangorodrim does not stack with other potent incoming damage effects, so obviously it does not stack with Oathbreaker's Shame for Red Captain. And the Breaking of Thangorodrim is not as strong as Oathies. Oathies is 35%, and we're going to call this skill Boathies. Make it a thing, Boathies and Oathies. So if you pop both these, you get a 25% incoming damage on the target for 20 seconds, so it lasts a little bit longer than Oathies. But both these is also 10% incoming damage for AoE enemies within 10 meters for 15 seconds. So if you have one target, you throw it on that target, they get a 25% incoming damage for 20 seconds, but any enemies nearby within 10 meters will also get a 10% incoming damage for 15 seconds. So really strong AoE, both these, really strong skill for Blue Mariner. Moving on in the trait line, the Relaxing Wind will increase the self-healing from wind shanties by 400%. Let's have a look. You can see that the shanties now heals yourself, restores 0.5% of max morale. Every time you use a buff, you get a little heal on yourself. Steady Winds will increase the duration of the wind shanties. So skills like the North Wind will last longer, and the West Wind and the South Wind. Bloodied Foes is another really strong skill you get access to as a Blue Mariner. You can also get it, like I think Redline Mariner will definitely go far down and get the Marked Foes skill. Marked Foes is also AoE, dealing damage, does not stack with the Captain's Telling Mark. So another disparity between Blue Mariner and Red Captain, but it gives a 5% incoming damage for 10 seconds, but the skill has a 15-second cooldown. But Marked Foes is AoE, so basically AoE Telling Mark, but with a little bit of downtime, but still a really strong skill to have. Known by heart, you've sung some shanties for so long that recalling them requires almost no thought. Reduces the cooldown of your shanty skills. And at the capstone trait skills, we get the Booming Voice. I'm not exactly quite sure what this does. Your shanties further enhearten your allies. So I was thinking it might have increased the healing that you get from using your shanty skills. I'm not exactly sure what this does, because I didn't really see any change in the tooltip once you use this. So that might be something we'll figure out later. So Booming Voice, your shanties further enhearten your allies. Not sure exactly what this does yet. Guided by the Stars is another capstone skill in blue that is really strong. You can go ahead and take a look at this skill. Guided by the Stars, a 4-minute cooldown, so a really long cooldown, but this will apply to every raid member within 40 meters, 25-second duration, 3% critical hit chance, 25% incoming healing modifier, 50% crit defense, and a finesse rating. So a really strong buff for your raid, but it has a really long cooldown. So that pretty much covers the trait line of Blue Mariner. So we're going to take a look at, I just wanted to see the potential of both these and how your buffs would work with it. So this is like a potential buffing scenario I can see for the Blue Mariner, for like big burst windows. And obviously you want to dip into red to get the Salt Sea Blade for the 3% mitigation buffs. for the 3% litigation debuffs. So I think because Salty Blade is 100% uptime, you would definitely want to open with that. And I can see the buff chain being something like this. You would then do Guided by the Stars because it has a really long duration, into the Breaking of Thangor Rodrim because Oathis or Bothies is 20-second duration. Then you would apply your West Wind because it has a 17-second duration. So you kind of want to get like the effects of most of your buffs while these buffs are active. So Guided by the Stars into Breaking of Thangor Rodrim, then West Wind for the damage buff for 17 seconds. Then you probably do the Banners of War for the damage buff for 15 seconds. Then you put Marked Foes on your target for the 5% incoming damage. And then you use your finisher, Dramatic Flourish, to get the 25% critical hit chance, hopefully while all these buffs are running. And you also get the finisher damage bonus. You could potentially do like a finisher chain before starting the this rotation, for example, like Lunge into Salt Sea Blade. Lunge would also give you the 4% damage buff, and then you would chain all your buffs, giving you really strong damage potential. The North Wind I put last because it has the crit defense debuff. It's still worth using, but it's probably something you put in last. That's a potential like damage burst window rotation that I could see. Maybe some minor changes, but this is like a baseline idea for how you can maximize your DPS output. And I also wanted to like theorize a bit how you can dip into the other lines. Obviously, as a blue mariner, you're probably not going to have a red mariner. You might have, but you definitely want to get the Salt Sea Blade if you're the only mariner in the raid. So I try like getting the minimum in blue line and then getting the Salt Sea Blade. And there's also a trait that is really strong in yellow. If you make it all the way down to the enervating counter, after anticipation, riposte increases the damage your target receives 2.5% potency. So what exactly does this mean? It means that after using a Blade Shield into riposte, you will get a damage buff on or damage debuff on the target. Let's try it. Riposte. You can see the incoming damage. 5% incoming damage. This is something you can keep 100% uptime if you would like. So that's basically a telling mark for free if you go deep into yellow line. So the question with the blue mariner is, do you want to get the minimum in blue, get Salt Sea Blade, and then get the 5% incoming damage? You probably want to get it, right? But the question is, do you really want to dip into yellow line? Because there's not a lot of useful stuff here. There's some mitigations that are nice for you. And there's like a making your cleanse raid wide and targetable. But other than that, there's not a huge amount of value in yellow. You basically go into yellow to get enervating counter. And I'm feeling like you probably want to get it if you're a blue mariner. 5% increase, 100% uptime is pretty strong. But the cost of going deep into yellow will be that you can't get as much stuff in red, or you can't get as much stuff in blue. So it's really interesting that there seem to be a lot of different options. If you want to be a blue mariner that deals a lot of damage yourself, it will be really nice to get all of this red line stuff, improving your DPS quite a while, improving your personal DPS. But also if you're in a raid, I feel like you possibly want to get enervating counter, because the 5% incoming damage buff, 100% uptime, all you just need to do is Blade Shield into riposte. And they both have like a Blade Shield has a 5-second cooldown and riposte a 10-second cooldown. So every time riposte is up, you would just do Blade Shield into riposte, and you would get the 5% damage buff for 15 seconds. So I would say this is something worth thinking about if you're a blue mariner. A lot of different ways you can trade. You can go heavy for self buffs in red, but I feel like in a raid scenario, something like this might be the meta build. But that's it for the first look at the Shantycaller, the blue mariner, kind of like a buffing line. If you have any questions, make sure to drop them in the comments and I'll try to answer as best as I can. But blue mariner looks like a worthy competitor to red captain. Hey! Hey you! Yeah, you! What do you want? You enjoy my content and you want to support me? Fine, I'll show you how you can do it. I would really appreciate if you like the video and subscribe to my channel. You can also support me through my Ko-fi homepage. If you're playing or looking to play Lord of the Rings online, there is one place you need to be. The Ghyniverse is a Discord server created for the community of the players of Lord of the Rings Online. The server is getting close to 7,000 members, and in this server you'll find tons of helpful information. There's monthly giveaways, easy access to patch notes, you can keep up with my YouTube videos, my streams. If you're a streamer, you can ask for the streamer role and you can announce your streams in the other stream channel. There are discussion channels for pretty much everything, every class, monster players. But the best thing about this server is probably the Gearing Resources tab, where you can find anything from trait lines for every class, every build. There are stat goals, where you can find out what stats you should aim for on your characters. Really helpful information about drop rates from instances, as well as screenshot from all the new loot that appears in the game. If you enjoy LOTRO, you should definitely consider joining this server, and hopefully I'll see you in Middle-earth. If you were part of the Ghyniverse already, you might have noticed that another tab appeared at the top, the LFF server. This server is a brand new server that I created, the LFF Ghyniverse. In this server, you can select which servers you want to keep up with, and once you select your server, say you select Arkenstone, you will see the LFF, the kinship advertisement, looking for kinship and trade channels, and there's also voice channels if people want to use those. The LFF channel is basically a looking for fellowship channel where people can post if they need players for the runs, and this way people don't have to be logged into the game to see the chat. They can just instead get a notification on their Discord. There's also a kinship advertisement page where kins can post their kinship advertisement and have people join their kins, and you can also post in the looking for kinship chat if you're looking for a kinship, but make sure to take a look in the kinship advertisement first and look through all the kin to find a suitable kin for you. There's also a trade channel if people want to buy or sell stuff that you can use. Hopefully you'll consider joining this server to bring the community even more together, not just in the game, but also outside of the game.